Audrey Hepburn. I don't really have an intro planned, but that's kind of all I need to say. Breakfast at Tiffany's is number 97. Now, before I get started, the first bit of this video is going to be no spoilers, so in case you haven't seen Breakfast at Tiffany's, I'm not going to spoil anything for you. I'm going to talk about a few things that I really like about the film, and then I'm going to give you a warning before I get into the second bit where I go a little bit more in depth on some elements that I like a lot about this film. And don't forget to like this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe for more. And with that being said, let's get into Breakfast at Tiffany's. Breakfast at Tiffany's was released in 1961 and was directed by Blake Edwards, who you may know from the old Pink Panther movies. Again, can't believe I'm saying it again, but not the new Pink Panther movies starring Steve Martin, the really old ones. He directed like 7 of them. In fact, he created the characters there. And this film stars Audrey Hepburn in the lead role as Holly Golightly, as well as George Peppard, who stars as Paul, otherwise known as Fred. And this film is about a young socialite in 1960s New York playing the game to get where she thinks she wants to go whenever she meets a young writer who makes her reevaluate what it is she exactly wants out of life. And while this premise for a romantic comedy seems derivative now, and it seems like something that we've seen a million times, it's only because movies like this pave the way for all the ones that we've seen before. It does everything that it wants to do, and it does it very well. You can tell that everyone who is associated with this film cared a lot about what was put on the screen, as well as how their work was going to be perceived by the audience as well as the critics. Which is so important for a film like this, because the premise is fairly straightforward. I mean, you have a young woman, a young guy coming together in New York City. How many times have we seen that? However, it's the energy in this movie which really takes it up to the next level. Between the Academy Award winning score, the costumes, the production design, and Audrey Hepburn's performance, this film just takes everything that you know about a romantic comedy and dials it up to 11, does it super well, and spares no expense whenever it comes to entrancing you in the world of the 1960s New York. And that's part of why I loved this movie so much the first time I watched it, because it's so easy with a film like this that has what could be perceived as a straightforward premise for people just to dial it in, just like develop the costumes, get them in a New York apartment, just, do whatever. But everyone, it's obvious that they took such pride in their jobs, no matter what level they were on, whether they were Audrey Hepburn in front of the screen or they were the people sewing her dress. Everyone does their job very well, no matter what level it was on. So good job to everybody who worked on this film. And speaking of recognition, this movie got a lot of it. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards back in the day. Audrey Hepburn was nominated for Best Actress, and then the art direction was nominated as well as the writing. I forgot to mention as well that this was adapted from a novella of the same name by Truman Capote, who's a obviously very legendary writer. If you aren't familiar with him, there's actually a film about his life starring Philip Seymour Hoffman that's very good as well. Then it won for Best Original Song, Moon River, as well as its score. And the score really is off the charts here. There wasn't a moment whenever I was rewatching this movie that I didn't feel the elegance of the scene. Even in Audrey Hepburn's small little New York apartment, she's got a couch that's kind of a half bath, like a literally half a bathtub. I'll include a photo here. I'm actually kind of jealous of that. I kind of want one, but it also seems kind of dirty. I don't know. But what was I talking about? But yeah, the score is really great, and it's absolutely Oscar worthy, so I'm glad that the composer was recognized for his work in this film. And fun fact, Moon River was actually not going to be in the movie. The production company or the distribution company, somebody wanted to cut it after they had done a few test screenings, but both of the producers actually pounded the table and said, heck no, you're not taking out Moon River, it's a great song. And Moon River went on to win the Academy Award for Best Original Song, Song of the Year at the Grammys, I believe Record of the Year at the Grammys, and dozens of other awards as well. So goes to show you, if you really believe in something, don't give up on it. Like, fight to keep that thing in the movie if you're in that situation, or just if you really believe in something, maybe it's going to be worth it, because they wanted to cut the Song of the Year at the Grammys and at the Academy Awards from the film, and now here we are. And if you aren't familiar with the song that I'm referring to, Moon River, just look up Audrey Hepburn's rendition of it from this film. It's really soft and really sweet, and I really love it. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and go into Audrey Hepburn and her performance. So I'm going to be a little biased here, because Audrey Hepburn is hands down my favorite actress of all time. Her presence in any film that she's in just automatically elevates it to a whole other level. I love the ability to be able to look at her whole filmography now that obviously her career is over. She passed away several years ago. Rest in peace, Audrey Hepburn. But anyway, I just love the ability to look at her whole filmography and see the progression of her career. And Breakfast at Tiffany's came at a time for Audrey Hepburn where she had already won an Academy Award. She was one of the biggest names, one of the biggest faces in Hollywood. And it's so easy for someone in that position to sort of hone in on what they're good at and just stick with it. But what impresses me about her here at Breakfast at Tiffany's is she actually said that this was her most challenging role of her career, because Audrey Hepburn, is a natural introvert, and her character in this film is definitely extroverted. If you haven't seen it, she's absolutely an extrovert. If you have seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. But I love her here. This is probably her best work of her career, I would have to say. I mean, she's nothing short of iconic here. You know the images from this film that are iconic. It's her face. There is truly no other actress like her. And I'm not going to sit here and say that she's the most talented actress of all time, because I don't believe that's true, but nonetheless, she's my favorite, and she, I think, was perfect here. And I just love being able to see her in this film do her thing, because it's the best that she has ever been. And I just think there's a lot to be said whenever an actress accepts a role that she wouldn't normally take and makes it just seem so natural. So kudos to Audrey Hepburn. If you're on the fence about seeing this movie, and none of the other praises that I've been talking about here really matter to you, watch it for Audrey Hepburn, because it's a truly iconic performance. And I mentioned the term EGOT in one of my earlier videos, and that's whenever someone has an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. Only 16 people have ever done it, and Audrey Hepburn is one of those 16. So if that doesn't tell you how talented she is, I don't know what does. Definitely check her out in this film if you haven't seen it. Whenever it comes to things that you should know before you watch this film for the first time, there are just two elements that I want to make sure that you know about. One of which is just the profession of Audrey Hepburn. Now, Truman Capote has come out and said that she is not a call girl in this film, but she is a lady of the night. You know, you don't see anything that she does, and it's not even alluded that she does anything primarily illegal, I guess. But just know that before you go into the film if you haven't seen it. And then the second thing is just, it's pretty uncomfortable to talk about, but it's important to mention if you haven't watched it. There's a very famous comedian in this film named Mickey Rooney who is in yellowface, and it's really cringy. It's not funny, and it's just racist, and it's not good. And if that element makes you uncomfortable, I would say that his character isn't even that important to the movie. You can probably just skip over most of his scenes, and you're not even going to skip a beat. But I feel like I just have to warn you in case you haven't seen the film. But other than that, this film has been highly influential. It's one of the most iconic pieces of art that we have ever seen whenever it comes to cinema in the modern age. It's, for the most part, a very fun and light romantic comedy film with a lot of substance there as well. So I highly recommend this film to you if you haven't seen it and you enjoy things like that, because this just does it as well as you could possibly do it. And if anything, watch it to see Audrey Hepburn at her best. Alright, now with all of that being said, if you haven't seen Breakfast at Tiffany's, go ahead and shut this video off. watch the film, and then come back for the second bit. Alright, now for everyone here who has seen Breakfast at Tiffany's, or if you just decided to keep the video running and you don't really care about spoilers, I'm going to go into the development of this film, Audrey Hepburn, more in depth, and then its overall legacy. And whenever it comes to the development of this film, it did not get off on the right foot. Truman Capote hated that Audrey Hepburn was casted in this, which is mind-blowing to a big fan of hers like me, but whenever you think about his reasoning, there's actually some substance there. See, Truman Capote's problem with Audrey Hepburn being cast was that he felt that she was too elegant to play the character that he had written in his novella, which, whenever you think about it, that's kind of warranted, because one of the reasons why I like Audrey Hepburn so much is because she is just so elegant in everything that she's in, regardless of the role. And I personally think that she makes it work in this film, but I see where Truman Capote's coming from. Actually, the really fun fact here is who he wanted to play the character of Holly Golightly over Audrey Hepburn. And that person, I bet you can't guess it, that person was Marilyn Monroe. Let that sink in for a second. Marilyn Monroe was his number one choice for Breakfast at Tiffany's, and I can't sit over here and say that Marilyn Monroe wasn't a good actress. I actually have not seen any of her films, but I feel like you get a totally different movie with that. And actually, I'm a little fuzzy on if Marilyn Monroe was offered the part, but basically her and her agents didn't feel like it was a good move for her career to play a, quote, lady of the night at that point in her career, so she ended up accepting a role in a movie called The Misfits. And after that, it wasn't even Audrey Hepburn next on the list. They actually wanted Shirley MacLaine, who is a legendary actress in her own right. But Audrey Hepburn was not high up on the list here on the actresses that they wanted to have be in this movie, which is crazy to me whenever you think about how iconic she is now after the fact. I mean, her role in here is easily one of the best of her entire career, and just the images of her, it makes you wonder if this movie would be as iconic with Marilyn Monroe in there, because she's obviously still a Hollywood icon to this day, but I feel like this movie just would have been very different with her in mind. But I'm very happy with the movie that we got, but still I would like to wonder what this movie would have been like with Marilyn Monroe instead. Truman Capote was actually very, very, very upset with Paramount whenever they decided to cast Audrey Hepburn. He's actually quoted as saying, "Paramount double-crossed me in every way when they casted Audrey." And that may not be the exact quote, but that's about like 90% of that quote. And it's just crazy to think that he was that upset about it. But you have to respect an artist for knowing what his work is about, and Truman Capote was obviously a great writer. He's totally entitled to his opinion. I'm also entitled to mine. I think Audrey Hepburn was great in this. Rest in peace to Truman Capote, but Audrey Hepburn is awesome here. Something else that I thought was interesting whenever it came to the development of this movie is all of the exterior shots were actually shot in New York, which is, a small touch, but it's something that isn't easy. And I respect any film that actually films on location, so kudos to everybody on this film that had a role in that being the case. And actually something else was, this is the first film that was actually filmed in Tiffany's. I got clearance from the actual store to film there. In fact, they had somewhere around 40 security guards guarding all of their jewelry in the store while they were shooting the scenes in there, to make sure that nobody involved with the shoot were going to steal anything. And now, on the topic of Audrey Hepburn, I want to go a little more in depth on what she means to this movie. And the first thing is, I had so much fun watching her play a sort of aloof character here. And like I said before, I understand Truman Capote's criticism whenever it comes to the casting as Audrey Hepburn, because even in this movie, whenever she's playing a character who's sort of aloof, she's always sort of bringing that extra something, there's always a hint of elegance whenever it comes to her, because that's just who she is, and there's not really a whole lot you can do about that. However, my own belief is that just because it wasn't the Holly Golightly in the book that was envisioned doesn't mean that it was the wrong Holly Golightly. And I feel really strongly about that because she really does knock it out of the park here. All in all, she is the epitome of iconic here. This is one of the most iconic performances that you can think of whenever it comes to cinema, and her work here is absolutely timeless. I can't speak enough praises about Audrey Hepburn. And if this is the only film that you've ever seen her in, I highly recommend you go back and you watch her filmography because her work is just in a total league of its own. And speaking of iconic, let's get into this film's overall legacy. I mean, like I said before, this film has some of the most iconic imagery of cinematic history. The costumes used in this film are selling for almost $1 million now. The style that they chose for Audrey Hepburn's character is just so iconic. Everything about the environment of this film is entrancing. It makes you feel like you are in 1960s New York playing the social game, meeting people who are disingenuous. You are just drinking, you're having a good time, you're wearing clothes that you can't afford, you're spending too much money, and you're kind of a mess. And while this film takes place in the 60s, I found the story of Holly Golightly to be one very reminiscent of what we see now. I mean, just look at that party scene. It's full of people posturing, social climbing whenever they're really all just concerned about themselves. I mean, there's a part in the scene whenever a woman is just laughing at herself in the mirror, crying to herself in the mirror. A guy is wearing an eye patch, and it's later revealed, I guess he's in an argument with a woman. He just flips it up, and he has a fully functioning eye. But it's just a bunch of people not concerned about anyone else around them. It's just all posturing and all trying to level up, I guess, and get whatever it is that they want. And it really reminded me of what we see nowadays whenever it comes to social media. I mean, a lot of it is people portraying themselves in an image that they want people to believe about them. And it's hard to find genuine moments of sincerity a lot of times on social media. And I think just that message of what people actually want and how people present themselves and how they use that to get what they believe that they want, or how they catch this vision of their life that they're trying to obtain, whatever it is really interesting. And it was really interesting for me to watch the film with social media being present nowadays. And it really just goes to show how timeless that message is, that while you could present yourself to be a certain way, or you want people to believe something about you, at the end of the day, it's the genuine and raw emotion that are really going to get you what you want. And that's something that Golightly pushes back against a lot in this movie that she eventually finds in Paul. The character Holly Golightly loves the idea of comfort, but only in the way that she envisions it. She envisions herself being with a really rich man who can take care of her and support her and give her all of the things that she wants. She left Texas. She didn't want to be that small town girl, the young bride that she was. She wanted whatever it was in Los Angeles, New York. She wanted to be a wild thing. She doesn't even go to the trouble of getting furniture in her apartment until she feels comfortable. The goal line is always changing with her. Whenever she feels like she's getting close to some sort of comfort, whatever that is to her, she goes and she upends her entire life. I mean, there's a part in this movie where they talk about how she had an audition in LA whenever she was there, and she decided not to go. She went to New York because she's never been to New York. And near the end of this movie, whenever she's kind of hitting rock bottom and her Brazil man leaves her, she still wants to go to Brazil, even though Paul is sitting right there with her, professing his love for her. She's saying, "I've never been to Rio." She's constantly just deciding whatever the situation is, even if it's a good one, it isn't exactly how she envisioned it, so she doesn't want it. She just pushes it away. It's so interesting to follow a character who, for 90% of the movie, you can tell that she genuinely cares about Paul, even though she calls him Fred. And no matter how much she pushes him away, you can tell that she really does care about him, but she will not allow herself to grow comfortable with him because it isn't exactly what she wants. Paul isn't rich. She's not rich. Paul isn't perfect. She's not perfect. Nothing about this is perfect. He's a writer who hasn't written anything in 5 years, so he's not exactly a super successful person. I mean, he has a published book, which is awesome, but neither is she. And even though nothing about them is perfect, the film is a journey of her having to come to terms with not everything has to be perfect. Maybe perfection is in the imperfect things, and that, in a way, is perfect for her life. I just love the scene between them whenever they are in her kitchen and she just mentions that she would marry him in an instant for his money, and she asks him if he would do the same, and he goes, in a minute. And naturally, her character notices the raw emotion coming from Paul's voice and tries to deflect that and just negate it. Walks over in the best way she knows how and just nonchalantly kisses him, sort of in a way to like prove that there's no actual emotion there. You know, we're just good friends. I can come up and kiss you on the lips and nothing will come from it. Only to her surprise, whenever she kisses him, you can tell as the viewer that there was something there. There was a spark. She has a split moment whenever she's just looking at him, and she is surprised that she is actually having feelings, and she can't even play it off as a friendly kiss because that's just not what it was. Audrey Hepburn in that scene is excellent. That little look tells you everything you need to know about where Holly Golightly is with her emotional state, and that she obviously has feelings for Paul, but she just can't allow herself to be with him. Just because you want something different doesn't mean that that's necessarily what you need. Nothing in life is going to be exactly perfect. I mean, the best scene in this movie is at the very end, where it is a far from perfect setting. It is the pouring rain. It's really the first time in the entire film that Holly Golightly isn't just prim and proper, has her hair perfect, has her outfit perfect. She's standing there in the rain trying to find Kat, and Paul is there just looking at her, finally figure out that what she has right now is what she wants. I just love the progression of Holly Golightly's character, and that this film has a happy ending like that, with her being able to actually appreciate what she has and acknowledge that while in her life she will probably never be the person that she aspired to be, it doesn't mean that she hasn't had a good and perfect life in her own respect. And I just think that overall message is part of why this film has stood the test of time. Like I said before, it's been 50 years that this movie's been out, and I'm sitting here in 2021 talking about it, and these lessons are things that we can pull back into our life. The setting is so unique, and it really gets you into 1960s New York, but I think that just makes it ever more prevalent that the narrative is amazing because you're able to be put in that setting but also take away lessons that you can apply to your life regardless of what time you're living in. So yeah, this film has a lot of great lessons that you can apply into your life if you haven't seen it already, or maybe if you haven't seen it in that scope, and I think it was absolutely a worthy addition to the National Film Registry in 2012, as well as this list. If you ever want to return to 1960s New York, experience elegance, I guess, and Audrey Hepburn at her finest, Breakfast at Tiffany's is definitely worth the rewatch. So yeah, that's Breakfast at Tiffany's, number 97. I had a blast rewatching this film, and it's absolutely worthy of the Blink-182 song made about it. I knew I couldn't go this whole video without at least acknowledging that that exists. That song's a banger. Love it. Love this movie as well. But anyway, what did you think of Breakfast at Tiffany's? What are some of your favorite scenes? Is there anything that I didn't talk about that you just love? Leave it down in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you haven't already, and subscribe for more. I have 96 more of these to make, and it's definitely going to be a marathon. Can't wait to have you guys along for the ride, and I will see you all for number 96.